Hi all, welcome back. My name is Mari Gushi. I am an MBA student at INSEAD, and in this next panel we'll talk about a promising and growing resource that has an important role to the transition to a net zero world, biofuels and biomass. Being one of the world's leaders in the sector, Brazil stands in a unique position to collaborate with other countries, exploring scalable solutions and helping define standards and practice worldwide. Brazil is currently the largest producer and exporter of sugarcane-based ethanol, which has diverse applications across many sectors, such as transportation, energy generation, and the production of sustainable aviation fuel, SAF. Despite the International Energy Agency predicting that by 2050, biofuels will contribute to around 27% of the global transportation fuel mix, many uncertainties remain. In this panel, we'll learn more about new technologies, needed policies, and geopolitical landscape. So please welcome in our stage our moderator, Antonio Uras, partner at ADVISIA OC&C, an international consulting company and president of INSEAD Alumni Brazil, and our speakers. Caio Dafico, investment and business development director at Atvos, a global biofuel and sugar producer, and Laia Barbarà, head of climate strategy at the World Economic Forum. Thank you.
Bon après-midi à tous. Êtes-vous préparés pour une discussion passionnante sur les biocarburants? Mieux vaut dire des carburants durables, sustainable fuels. Before I start, I want to call your attention again to the massive floods in Rio Grande do Sul. Rio Grande do Sul is 51% of the area of France, and 90% of it has been affected. 65 people missing, 163 people dead, 106 wounded, 56,000 shelters, 582,000 homeless, and 2.3 million affected. We desperately need donations, and at the Brazil Climate Summit Europe page, you find instructions on how to do it. Well, as Mario pointed out, biofuels will play a key role in transport decarbonization. Transport represents 20 to 25% of the global emissions, and biofuels will represent up to 37%, as Mario pointed out. Before I have said before also, let's start because we don't have a lot of time. So, Caio, let's start by you, and then let's start. I wanted you to explain a little bit the different types of feedstock, application, and production methods of biofuel before coming to ethanol.
Okay, Uras, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Just before jumping to that, let me quickly introduce Atvos. So Atvos is the second largest ethanol producer in Brazil. We produce over 2 billion liters of ethanol, capacity to produce over 3 billion liters. And we're also a sugar producer and also one of the largest electricity producers through biomass in Brazil. We produce approximately 3 terawatt hours of energy. And well, Brazil is a powerhouse for biofuels. Mainly, there are many ways of producing biofuels that we use in the country. The most important ones are first ethanol, that started back in the 70s as a way to reduce our oil consumption, and now is one of the most important parts of our decarbonization strategy for transportation. Roughly 43% of Brazil's light fleet consumption of fuels come from ethanol, either using it as a blend into the gasoline or at a E100 or filling completely your gas tank with ethanol. On the other hand, we also have biodiesel, which is largely produced by from vegetable oils. And now in Brazil, we are developing a series of new biofuels such as biogas and biomethane. Atvos has a pleasure to announce the largest biomethane plant in Brazil with 28 million cubic meters of production of biomethane per year, which is used as a substitute for diesel, but also as a fuel to produce electricity. And finally, we have the advanced biofuels, which are being developed both on the pathway to produce both SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, or HVO, which is a renewable diesel. Those are drop-in fuels that can easily substitute the fossil fuels, and on those it can either be produced from vegetable oils on the HAFA pathway, or it can be produced on the ethanol base on the ATJ, alcohol to jet pathway. And finally, on a third route that Walter Schalke have mentioned previously on his panel, that is the gasification of biomass, which is the Fischer-Tropsch pathway. The good part of all those fuels for Brazil is that we are the large commodity producers, the large feedstock producers of all those fuels. So we are the second largest ethanol producer in the world. We are the largest soybean producer in the world, the largest grain producer in the world, and also the largest biomass producer in the world. And we have a lot of opportunities for investments and for the development of biofuels to accelerate the energy transition to the world.
Thank you, Caio. Laia, you heard, there are a lot of different biofuels, but for all of them, there is a limited supply for the demand. In your view, how should we select the biofuels, the different biofuels, that Caio mentioned, and to what sectors should have access first?
Thanks, Antonio, and thank you for having me here. I have to say that Brazil is very close to my heart, and so is climate. I did part of my PhD on climate change in Campinas, and so when I received the invite to come here on the Brazil Climate Summit, I was like, how come not? For sure, let's go there. So very excited to be here. So to your question, I'll start by zooming out, and I promise I will answer granularly. I wanted to zoom out just to reflect that the transition from coal to oil to gas took us around 60 years to move forward. And now the bad news is that we cannot afford another 60 years to decarbonize. We need to be net zero by mid-century, the latest, right? So that is around 26 years, the maximum that we have. And on top of that, we know that we do have some hard-to-abate sectors, like aviation, that we're focusing on today, among others, right? So that is extremely complex. And what happens is that this decarbonization journey of hard-to-abate sectors, we know that it is an S-curve. And what that means is that basically it is more steep at the beginning, meaning that whatever we do between now and 2030, it's going to be crucial. So in this steep curve, what we got to do, back to your question, is do the right allocation of the limited sustainable resources that we have. And those are sustainable biomass, that Brazil is very lucky to have such feedstock. Almost there's no virtual country that can say so. So that's certainly a comparative advantage. But also it needs to be coupled with renewable electricity and even green hydrogen, as a panel earlier was discussing. So scarce resources to decarbonize a lot of sectors. My opinion is that it should be diverted towards those sectors that are harder to decarbonize and that don't have available alternatives. And I'm happy to put a bit of names and surnames into this. So if you look at aviation, we know that the only solution available today to decarbonize this hard-to-abate sector, that it's a driver for economic growth, it's SAF that come from biofuels. There's no other solution today. However, if we look at trucking, biodiesel is an option. Yes, it is. But we know that electric and hydrogen fuel trucks exist, are starting to be cost competitive, and even the infrastructure that is needed, it's starting to be deployed, not everywhere, but in certain regions. So how about diverting this limited sustainable biomass towards those sectors that don't have alternatives, that will need it the most? Because there's one certainty, and it's that this biomass is limited.
Very good answer, Laia. Caio, coming back to you again. Walter Schalka mentioned, that Brazil is the largest exporter of photosynthesis in the world. When you say photosynthesis, we can say food or we can say fuel. How do you believe that we are going to build the supply that we need to offer? Where will the productions of biofuel will come from? How we are going to scale this up?
Great question. Well, there's always the debate between food and fuel, because when we consider that we have limited resources, we need to prioritize among those, and then you create a case that you might have competition. But this is not exactly the case for Brazil. As was mentioned previously on other panels, we have 90+ million hectares of degraded land that you can't use to produce grains, to produce food today in Brazil. But you can use that for crops that can grow in those environmental places and can actually benefit the soil from those places, such as sugarcane. So sugarcane is a blessing in many ways, because it's a natural solar panel that you absorb energy and you can transform energy into many different ways, but at the same time recovering the places that it's being planted on. And it's an actual case. We have some industries or some plants where we're losing area to grains, areas that 15 years ago they were nowhere near to be used for agriculture. So and there are other crops as well that can use that. Energy crops such as macaúba in Bahia state, in other Cerrado is in a particular part of Brazil that it can grow. You can have a series of energy crops that can be helpful for that, and that you can scale up the production in Brazil. And speaking on numbers, 66% of Brazil is still natural vegetation. Out of the approximately 30%, 4% is urban area. We're not a very dense country. The 30% that is approximately for pasture and agriculture, out of this, 1/3 is agriculture, 2/3 is pasture, and out of this, we believe that we could almost double or even triple our planted area into those lands, especially on the degraded lands that I mentioned.
Wow. I have a much more comfort from your answer, Caio. I know that we are able to build, the scale we need. But then, Laia, comes, a very dear question, or maybe I could say expensive question, that there are very large price difference between fossil and low carbon fuels, How do we regulate and finance the transition, I'm sorry.
So in trying to be very succinct, I believe that there are 3 major barriers that if policymakers, industry leaders, and financiers manage to address within this decade, we can make the transition to sustainable aviation in this case, but also sectors generally, a success story. And those are, on the one side, bridging the price-cost differential that exists today between traditional kerosene and sustainable aviation fuels. And you can again substitute SAF for any other, like green steel if you wish, and it works the same way, right? But I'll focus for the sake of today's purpose into SAFs. So bridging this high cost differential. On the other hand, it's de-risking the first of a kind plants and helping with like decreasing this uncertainty that exists today, these low TRLs that we have, because we do have little experience. So anything that helps convert the first mover risk into a first mover advantage, it's exactly what is needed. So what does it take to move from a first of a kind plant into a second of a kind plant? And lastly, and most importantly, for Brazil, it's making sure that there's enough sustainable biomass, sustainable feedstock. Because not all feedstock is sustainable, not all biomass might be sustainable, or not everywhere at least. So I think that's also a very important point given the scarcity we discussed earlier.
Thank you, Laia. Caio, early on we talked about a very interesting concept, that's the carbon intensity concept. As we are now discussing, economics, I want you to explain the concept, of carbon intensity, and then to talk a little bit about biomass and biogas and how this can be also scaled up to help transition.
Sure. Well, basically, carbon intensity is the amount of carbon that you're going to emit in a certain process and it's measured by the grams of CO2 equivalent divided by the amount of energy that you put into the system, or the megajoules that you put in. Well, this is the most important part of the discussion, right? We need to decarbonization is basically about reducing or even zeroing the carbon intensity that you have in a certain fuel. And well, one of the things that is most important when you're talking about the biofuels, as Laia well mentioned, is that not all biofuels will be sustainable. You can have actually you can produce SAF that will have higher emissions than the fossil fuels, especially coming from corn ethanol in certain places in the world. So you need to make sure that, yeah, I'm not not mentioning the places in the world. So this is very important to keep in mind, is that we need to lower or even to zero it, or even to go to the negative terrain of carbon intensity. And one of the things that you can do is to look at your life cycle and understand, well, where can I decarbonize? At Atvos, we have a huge work on decarbonizing and turning into a net zero by 2035, where the first move that we're doing is exactly on the biomethane. The project that I mentioned previously will be almost solely for our own fleet, to replace our diesel into biomethane, and by that we can slash 15% of our carbon intensity, just because our trucks and our tractors won't be using diesel anymore. It will be using biomethane. There are other places that we're going to, such as carbon capturing and storage, where we expect to, also biofertilizers and green fertilizers. Basically, our emissions are basically the diesel and fertilizer. So if we slash that, we could go to net zero. But we want to go further to carbon capturing, where we should go to the negative terrain. So we expect that in the long term, we're currently every megajoule of ethanol, we are emitting 20 grams of CO2. We believe that we can go all the way down to minus 15 to 20 grams of CO2 being emitted. Or if you use our fuel, you would be actually capturing carbon in the end of the day. So this is the major concern that we need to make sure. Not all biofuels will be sustainable, but we need to make sure that our biofuel will be, and that we can even go to the carbon negative terrain.
Excellent. Laia, after 2035, the projected increase in electric vehicle penetration in transport markets will cause certainly a decline on international combustion engine vehicles, and a decline on liquid fuels. However, increasing mandates in aviation will outweigh this decline, and there will further demand for sustainable fuels. Talking about SAF, sustainable aviation fuels, that we mentioned that would be the main topic of today's discussion. How do we push the market leaders to incorporate SAF, and what are the potential influence of policies for doing that?
Thank you. And for a moment, I thought we're about to talk about tariffs and EVs, but happy to keep it to aviation now. So we were just discussing this choreography that the suppliers, the off-takers, the financiers, and the policymakers need to do all together. And it's very easy to end up saying, well, it is a chicken and egg scenario, and there's no way forward, and what we actually need to do is break the eggs and make a tortilla, as we would say in Spain, right? So in this spirit, we at the World Economic Forum, alongside the Biden administration and other governments, we created the First Movers Coalition. That is exactly that. Someone, in this case the off-takers, that get out there and say, hey, listen, we're here to pay the green premium, we're here to help get the global cost curve down, knowing that we're going to pay 5x or 6x, but we're doing that for a greater good, and that's going to go better in every other region later on, right? So the First Movers Coalition is exactly this. It works across the 7 hard-to-abate sectors that we just discussed, and it's composed by the 100 leading companies globally from all geographies that commit to procure green solutions, including SAF, but not just regular SAF, but high-quality SAF. And we were just talking about the carbon intensity, and that's the crux of the issue. Please, let's not talk about SAF in volumetric terms ever again. I think that we left that in COP26, but we moved along all the way, and actually the mandate that is being voted in Brazil, I'm very glad it refers to carbon CO2 reduction, which I think it's the right way to go, and it's quite novel. I don't think I've seen it in any other mandate globally. But sorry, I'm not going to lose my point. The First Movers Coalition looks into what I like to call super SAFs, which is SAF that reduces at least 85% of the LCA emissions, so an 85% emission reduction factor that can increase up to 100, or it can even go beyond 100 and get to negative, as you were saying. Why? Because those are the most expensive SAF. Those are the SAFs that have more technology uncertainty and that therefore are more in need of these demand signals, strong demand signals that will help bring the global cost curve down. So I'm just happy to say a couple more figures about the First Movers Coalition, and if there's any company interested in joining this group of the willing, just let me know. I'll be around. But today, more than 100 leaders that got together across 7 hard-to-abate sectors, and they showcase the art of the possible. And not only that, but I'm very proud to share that today, the First Movers Coalition represents the biggest demand signal in history from the private sector for green technologies, amounting a total of $16 billion. So hopefully this is going to help us break the chicken and egg scenarios that we're normally into.
Thank you, Laia. We need more coalitions like that, you know. First movers, second movers, third movers, you know. Caio, coming a little bit on the technology question, you know, focusing on the future. How biofuels can provide a way to produce sustainable aviation fuel and sustainable shipping fuel as well at scale? What are the promising technologies that we are investing to unlock SAF?
Great. So I've mentioned most of the technologies previously, but the first one and the most developed one is called the HAFA pathway, where you produce SAF cracking vegetable oils. It looks like a refinery in a sense that it's breaking the oils down to the fuels, but it's using vegetable oils instead of the normal fossil oil. The second one that is currently being developed on a very high level, on a very advanced stage of development, is called ethanol to jet, or alcohol to jet, which is the one that we're pursuing, which uses ethanol and it transforms ethanol into ethylene. Ethylene is a building block for the chemical industry and a natural building block. So you convert it to ethylene, and then you use ethylene to produce whatever molecule you want to, which now we're looking towards SAF, we're looking towards kerosene-like molecules, but we can go all the way up to diesel, we can produce gasoline, we can produce virtually anything. The third one would be Fischer-Tropsch, which is basically a technology that was made in the Second World War. So it's very it's not new at all, but you can use basically the gases, well, the syngas, which is basically carbon monoxide, and transform it into fuels. But finally, another one that is very promising and that we see future in it, especially for the second generation of Atvos plan into SAF, that would be power to liquids. So basically, you use energy to convert into hydrogen. You use CO2 that you capture from the air or from a process that is very that has a lot of emissions of CO2, and you use that to convert it into the fuel. This is the most promising one, but still, in terms of technology perspective, is the one that is least advanced, and especially the one that needs most of the first movers coalition help and support to make it happen. But still, all those technologies are very promising, and as typically we've heard that a lot of times here today, it's not about a competition, right? It's about having everything, and maybe even doing all those technologies, making that happen. That still won't be enough.
Laia, this will be the last question before we open to the audience. Maybe we have a few minutes for them. How is your position on book and claim practices for SAF through the lens of industry and policymakers?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily, like, it doesn't really matter if it's my position or not. I think there's a general consensus that book and claim is a key unlock for the deployment and scale up that is needed for sustainable aviation fuels. I think what we can discuss is how it can be done. But maybe I'll stop here for a second if there's someone that doesn't know at the moment or can't remember what book and claim is. Book and claim basically means we're producing high quality SAF in Brazil, in your production plant, but this SAF might want to be bought by Air France, since we're in France, okay. Do we have to track and to ship all this SAF as a liquid fuel here so that it can be in Charles de Gaulle fueled into an Air France airplane? Does it make sense, or we're creating more emissions of something that it was supposed to be a green fuel? So A, that's how it works today. B, there's a better way to do it, right? But for that, we of course need very strong data traceability systems in place, a global registry that will be making sure that there is no double counting. And who operates that? That's also another interesting question. We do at the moment have very different methodologies for calculating GHG emissions. Which are the valid ones, or how do we make sure that we're comparing apples to apples and not apples to pears? And there are different regulatory frameworks, right? A sustainable fuel or feedstock in a region might not be so in a different region. So all these questions are in the process of being addressed, and I'm hopeful that we're going to see such a system deployed sooner than later. I think this is the right photo finish to go, because there's one certainty, which is that carbon emissions don't understand borders, right? So whatever it is, the damage is happening to the atmosphere. I love book and claim, but I have 1 minute left. So I'll give it back to you, Antonio.
Thank you, Laia. I think that we have time for at least one question from the audience. Do I have organization?
Thank you. My name is Eric Raku. I work for BCG, but here in private capacity just to listen. SAF prices, I think, for if they are sustainable versus, let's say, jet fuel, can be factor 3. So that means airline tickets would rise, let's say, at least 50%, if not 200%. And Laia, you were advising one of the kind of 3 golden solutions is just let's make those green premia by companies work. So if one kind of does the numbers, that would be a lot of billions for green premia. Whilst, let's say, is there a limit to what green premium should be? Because I think I remember reading a report which said green premia can vary between 30% to 200%, but that report didn't say 400%. So is there a limit to those magical green premia?
Thanks for the question. And I'm personally very obsessed with the dynamics between the willingness to pay and the green premium. So happy to freak around with numbers anytime on this. But to your question, I think I would fundamentally disagree to the baseline, provided that you would be assuming that this airplane flies on 100% SAF. But today, they are able to carry only 50% SAF on their tanks. And we know that the reality is that they carry always less than 10 and almost always less than 5%. So this 5%, let's be optimistic here, this 5% of SAF that goes into the tank of this aircraft, yes, it would cost, you said X, like 5-fold time traditional kerosene or Jet A1, but then the rest of the 95% would still have the same price that the other fuel has. And the fuel, it's normally 30% of the flight ticket of any given airline to make it a bulk number. So for a flight like a Geneva-Paris one, as I may have taken today, took the train though, which is 150 francs or euros, you do the math faster than I do, but it's less than 5 euros or less than 15 for sure, right? So I think most of us in this room could easily pay for it. I don't think it's expandable to everyone in the world, certainly not, and I want to be very sensitive with this. But luckily, the ones that we're able to, I think we should start doing it, or even corporate travelers could start doing it. And also, just last note on these, the fluctuation that kerosene or just like fuel has, oil has, it's way greater than the increase of this very limited SAF that goes blended into the tanks brings into the equation. So I would love to start seeing some more corporates paying some green premiums for their travelers to continue going into in-person meetings, which are needed, like this one today.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, Laia, I think that 2 important topics. First, book and claim will be really important for the overall system, exactly because you can probably have a subsidy from corporate travelers or the ones that have the higher willingness to pay towards the less privileged ones and the less privileged markets. While, on the other hand, less privileged markets may be the best places to consume the fuel, such as in Brazil or in other countries in the global south. So book and claim will play an important role here to make that system work. Second thing, there is a responsibility that is really important for us feedstock producers to catch on that as well. The price per liter of SAF is 3x, but the price per abated carbon, which is the number that we should be tracking on, it can be considerably lower if we do the right thing and we make our part in the role of decarbonization. Because most of the carbon that we're talking about in SAF comes from the feedstock that you're using. But if you have a sustainable operation in the feedstock production, then you're slashing more carbon, then the price per carbon will be lower in the end of the day. And I don't think that, well, SAF prices will go down with scale and things, but the most important part is about reducing carbon footprint on the feedstock basis. Then we're going to have more sustainable SAF that is actually more economical as well for the airlines.
Thank you, Caio. Thank you, Laia. And let's go.